I remember the first time I saw her like it was a scene replaying in slow motion, sunlight through the window, the faint scent of lavender when she laughed, the way her hair caught the light just right. Her name was Emily, and for a long time I believed she was the person I would build the rest of my life around. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party, the kind of low-key gathering where everyone talks around a central couch and the music is soft enough that you actually have conversations. We started with the usual small talk about movies and food, but within an hour the conversation shifted into something honest: childhood memories, stupid fears, the kind of confessions people usually keep to themselves. I told her about being cheated on in the past and how it made me terrified of trusting anyone fully. She looked at me with that steady calm she had and promised, more gently than I had ever heard anyone make a promise, that she would never hurt me like that. I wanted to believe her so badly that I already had my defenses down before I knew anything else about her. For the first year and a half, everything felt warm and steady. We fell into each other's rhythms. She made coffee the way I liked it. I started leaving little notes on the counter reminding her about dumb things she forgot. Small rituals built into habits: Sunday morning walks, meal prepping together, laughing over terrible reality TV. It was easy to fall in love when every corner of your life started to have echoes of someone else. She moved into my apartment not long after we decided to be official. Her toothbrush found a permanent place by mine. Her clothes spilled gracefully into the dresser drawers. Her succulents brightened the windowsill. We planned trips, talked about future apartments, joked about dogs, those tiny, intimate plans that feel like a private currency between two people who are building something real. I didn't think too deeply about the future because the present felt so right. I assumed if you're with someone who fits into your life so seamlessly, the next steps will naturally come together. The first subtle thing that pulled at the seams of that seamlessness was time, how she started using it less with me and more for herself. It didn't happen overnight. At first it was reasonable stuff: an extra work dinner, a birthday celebration she wanted to attend, an art exhibit she'd been looking forward to. I told myself being supportive was part of being a relationship that worked, complimented her when she dressed up, encouraged her when she said she needed time to breathe. But as weeks slid into months, those excuses became less comfortable. She began heading out more often and coming home later. The casual texts that used to be peppered throughout the day faded into short, clipped messages sent between meetings. Where there were once long messages about how her day went, there were now emojis and quick replies. Her phone, which used to be casually placed face up on the coffee table, became a guarded item, locked, tucked away, and always on her person. She started turning off notifications to focus better, a small practical decision that nonetheless left me hungry for the connection that used to fill the cracks of my day. There were moments I tried to ignore, convincing myself that I was being paranoid. She would come back smelling faintly different, perfume notes that weren't mine, laughter that didn't include the small joke I kept in the pocket of my memory. Sometimes she'd be tired and distant and then suddenly bright and thrilled, as if she'd been feeding on something I didn't know about. Once, when I asked if she was okay, she hugged me with a pressure that made me think she might fall apart if I let go. "Work is just a lot," she said, and her smile was an invitation to rest my worries. I wanted to be the person who trusted her, the person who stood firm and let her have the space she needed. Love, in my mind, demanded grace and patience, not control. My doubts began to stack like bricks, small, shaky, and easily ignored on their own, but together they started building a wall between us. The turning point arrived on a Thursday evening I will never forget. I had made her favorite dinner, set the table, brewed tea the way she liked it, and waited because she texted earlier saying she had something important to talk about. When she walked through the door she looked different. There was a newness to her clothing, a slight tremor to her hands, and a quiet that felt heavy. She sat opposite me and told me she had an announcement. I laughed, assuming it would be a surprise party or a promotion. She didn't laugh back. Her eyes were hollow in a way I had never seen. And then, with the steady clarity of someone who had rehearsed these words until they could say them without collapsing, she said, "I'm engaged." I tried to laugh it off as a joke. She repeated it, "I'm engaged, to someone else." Those words landed like thunder. My mind scrambled to make sense of all the days that had made up our life together. Everything came rushing through: the nights she stayed late at work, the quiet texts, the little white lies that began to be more frequent. Betrayal is a slow poison, I realized, often beginning with harmless things that take root and grow into something deadly. She told me about Andrew, about how they had met 3 months before we had even known each other, how one thing led to another, and how it didn't feel like anything until it suddenly felt like everything. She kept trying to justify it. She said she had been honest in her heart but not in her actions. That she didn't plan for it to become this serious. That she loved me in her own way but could not see a future with me that felt secure. The words were a blur, soft and rehearsed, but the outlines were sharp. Someone else had promised her something I had not, or at least offered a version of the future that made sense to her at that time. When I asked her why she hadn't told me, why she had continued sleeping beside me, eating the meals I cooked, sharing laughs that she apparently reserved for two lives, she looked away and said the most cutting thing of all: "I didn't want to hurt you yet." The truth was a betrayal wrapped in a lie of compassion, and it crushed me in an entirely new way. What followed was a hazy, painful scramble: messages, calls that went unanswered, a frantic search through her social media, a numb attempt to stitch together a timeline. I found a message thread from Andrew sent by mistake to a group chat. Moments of their life that were invisible to me but real to them. He messaged me later, blunt and bewildered, telling me about their engagement and how he had only discovered me through a backup in her phone. Screenshots arrived, casual and merciless, pictures of dates, little inside jokes, promises typed out in text that she had apparently made to someone else while I was still thinking we were building a shared future. There were messages where she complained about me, called me clingy, said I was stuck in the past. The evidence I received was not just of infidelity but of deception so thorough it read like a double life constructed with precise care. She had crafted two narratives for two people, and I had been reading the wrong version. I packed her things a week after the announcement. There was a cold, efficient clarity to my movements: folding shirts, stacking mugs, returning books to the places they had been before her presence turned a house into our home. Packing felt like a ritual of separation, a way to create physical distance for the emotional chasm. I left the boxes by the door and sent a message: "Your things are out." Her reply was short, clinical: "Thanks." No apology, no admission, no real explanation. The emptiness of her response felt like confirmation that whatever depth our relationship had once held was now a closed chapter in someone else's book. I told myself I deserved more than silence, more than avoidance, and yet the reality was that I got what she had given me: minimal involvement with the consequence of maximum damage. In the weeks that followed, I learned more than I wanted. Friends filtered into my life like distant constellations, some bright with compassion, others near enough to offer practical support. A mutual friend, Lily, called me late one night, voice trembling. She told me Emily had been living multiple lives, texting different people different versions of herself, canceling and inventing reasons, shaping stories to suit the narrative she wanted each person to hold. It was not the simple story of two lovers. It was a spiderweb of lies that started to make sense only when you saw all the threads at once. Lily said she suspected something but felt trapped between loyalty and the fear of being the person who destroys friendships. She apologized for not telling me sooner, for standing by while the deception continued. Her guilt was real. It didn't take away the hurt, but it showed me how complicated betrayal can be, how community can fracture around personal secrets. The most confusing part was the human element, the strange normalcy with which other people wrapped their responses to the situation. Andrew reached out and expressed pain, confusion, and a desperate desire for closure that didn't involve railing publicly at Emily. He said he still loved her, incredulous at how someone could be engaged one minute and exposed the next. It was surreal to see two people in love with the same person but holding entirely different versions of the truth in their hands. I talked to therapists, who gave me language for the chaos: betrayal trauma, gaslighting, compartmentalization. They taught me how to breathe when my chest felt like it was collapsing, how to name my feelings without letting them own me. Therapy helped me untangle the mess of self-blame from the reality of being deceived. It taught me to see the lines where personal responsibility ends and manipulation begins. The nights after the revelation were the longest. Sleep became a fragile luxury I could only access in stolen molds, closing my eyes for 20 minutes only to wake with the taste of bitterness in my mouth. My bed, once a safe harbor, felt like a stage where half-truths were performed. I began compiling mental lists of moments that meant less now. The way she kissed me when she came home late. The whispered promises that now echoed with a new interpretation. My friends offered perspectives. Some suggested I confront her publicly. Others said leave it be and protect your dignity. I oscillated between wanting to explode and wanting to hide away. Grief over a relationship is messy. It's not neat like a funeral with a schedule. It was a slow grief that came unexpectedly in everyday places. At the grocery store when I saw the brand of tea she loved. On the bus when two strangers argued about future plans in a routine that used to be ours. Anger came later. After the numbness, hot and sour and prompt. I wanted explanations. I wanted to understand the practical decisions that led to this duplicity. I wanted to catalog every lie and build a case around them like evidence in a trial. But there is an odd kind of powerlessness when the person who hurt you refuses to participate in your unmasking. Emily stayed distant. She moved forward seemingly untroubled by the ruin she left in her wake. Her silence inflicted its own kind of cruelty, an insistence that she had agency over how much responsibility she would accept. The truth she had not only been about a person but about patterns, how she handled conflict, how she avoided discomfort, how she sought safety and convenience rather than honesty. She chose an easier path and left the debris behind. Over months, I had to reconstruct trust in myself. It felt absurd to have to rebuild confidence after someone else's deception, but that was exactly the work. I learned to set boundaries that were non-negotiable, no longer sliding into the role of the person who forgave everything because of fear of loss. I learned to ask direct questions and expect direct answers, to look for consistency between words and actions. Therapy recommended exercises, journaling, mindfulness, explicit naming of values, that grounded me. I took up new routines that were mine, weekend hikes where my thoughts could stretch out, an evening class in photography to redirect my focus, quiet dinners with friends who vouched for my worth when I couldn't. One of the strangest realizations was that the truth that had destroyed me could eventually become a source of clarity. There's a dark gift hidden in betrayal. It forces honesty by sheer inevitability. Once someone reveals who they truly are, however inconvenient, you are freed from pretending the relationship was something it was not. The painful unmasking meant I no longer had to reconcile the person I loved with the person she actually was. It severed the cognitive dissonance and allowed me to grieve a version of her that had been imagined rather than real. That process of unimagining was brutal and honest, and after the storm it left a steadier landscape where my decisions about love were less clouded by wishful thinking. Time, which felt slow and stingy at first, turned into a quiet healer. Little by little, the sharp edges dulled. I stopped replaying her face every time I closed my eyes. I started to find pleasure in small things again, the way sunlight slants across my kitchen table in the morning, the joy of a good book that takes me somewhere new, a playlist that felt like mine rather than ours. I dated again eventually, awkwardly and carefully, choosing people who demonstrated integrity and consistency over grand gestures. I learned to be kinder to myself, to recognize that being deceived was not proof of my inadequacy but of someone else's inability to be honest. I began to articulate standards for relationships that mattered: transparency, mutual respect, the ability to communicate honestly about discomfort rather than escaping into secrecy. I wish I could say the healing was linear, that every day lifted me higher, but the reality was jagged. There were setbacks, anniversaries that turned into reminders, mutual friends who asked awkward questions, a moment when I scrolled past a photo of her laughing with someone else and felt the old sting. Yet those moments grew fewer and softer. Each time I survived one, I proved to myself that I could survive the next. The resiliency didn't come all at once. It was cultivated, like putting one brick down at a time, steady and deliberate. What I learned from being deceived is complicated and bittersweet. People are imperfect, and sometimes the person you love will reveal depths you never knew existed, some compassionate, some cruel. The clarity that came after the devastation helped me refine what I wanted and what I would no longer tolerate. I realized the importance of confronting uncomfortable conversations early, of not allowing silent distance to calcify into deception. I also learned compassion, not for the person who betrayed me, necessarily, but for the complex mess of human motives. Betrayal often stems from fear, cowardice, and a desire for safety at the expense of others, and understanding that didn't excuse the behavior but contextualized it. When I look back now, the story of Emily and me does not define my worth. It is a painful, formative chapter that shaped my understanding of relationships. The truth: she had destroyed the life I thought I had, and in doing so, it forced me to rebuild a life on truer foundations. I am more cautious, yes, but also more attuned to integrity. My capacity for trust has been tested and refined, not extinguished. The wound she left healed into a scar that reminds me of the fragility of love and the resilience of the human heart. I don't know where Emily is now. Maybe she is building another life, or maybe she is still learning the cost of the choices she made. I don't know if she ever realizes the depth of the damage she caused or whether she ever truly confronts the pattern of seeking safety in duplicity. What I do know is this: when someone tells you a story about themselves that doesn't match their actions, believe the actions. When someone chooses not to communicate, they are choosing silence in the place where honesty belongs. And when your world is shattered by a truth you never saw coming, remember that the fragments can be used to construct something new, something truer, harder earned. and ultimately yours. If you are listening to this because you are walking through your own version of betrayal, know that the numbness you feel is valid, and so is your anger. There is no quick fix, no instant way to unknow what you now know, but there is also a path forward, one that requires patience, relentless self-care, and the courage to demand honesty. You will hurt for a long time, but you will also grow. The person who emerges on the other side will have scars, yes, but those scars are proof that you survived, that you learned, and that you are capable of rebuilding a life rooted in truth rather than illusion.